This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, and Brewers Outlet. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and Sunbury Motor Company. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Brought to you by our good friends at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummels Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. Ford, I went with Ford. Ah, boy, you try to make the best decision you can, and it turned out to be, for me, a great decision with the great help of the incredible people at Sunbury Motors. Everything, financing, everything couldn't have gone any better. And look, when you buy new, whether it's Ford, Kia, or Hyundai, the great warranties, but also the great safety features on the cars today. I don't care if it's Ford, Kia, Hyundai. The safety features are worth their weight in gold. And the pre-owned inventory, they go over each one with a fine-tooth comb, and they also do a great job with their service department. Quick lane, inspections, routine, difficult. They handle it all at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummels Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. So there you go. Another big weekend of sports coming up, including the game tomorrow at noon. And by the way, did I say on the show the other day, Matthew Stafford, in my opinion, there's no way in heck the Rams were going to let him go?
I think when you and Neil were talking about it, yes.
Yes, well, there's no way in heck they're letting him go. They've agreed to a restructured contract that keeps him in Los Angeles. I'm sorry. You cannot take somebody of that experience that's had success. I mean, you saw, look, the Eagles played great defense in the last 2 months of the season. But which team and which quarterback had the most success against them in the last 2 months of the season? After that game in Los Angeles, who came back and had the most success? It was Matthew Stafford. It was not Patrick Mahomes.
I read somewhere where he's made $340 million in his career, and I could never understand why, why you, at his age, why you would decide you would want to go to the Raiders or the Giants. I think were out there, like why he would want to go to one of those teams over money rather than stay with the Rams for even any kind of lesser amount, just because. Right. I mean, they're way closer to any kind of Super Bowl spot than the Giants and the Raiders are at this point, obviously.
Plus, I think there's probably a good chance he's also very comfortable.
Yeah, I mean,
in Los Angeles right now. I mean, you don't want to be relocating all the time. That's not fun, in the least. And now the question will be, what can they or do they want to do with Cooper Kupp? Meanwhile, Isaiah Bond says he's going to break Worthy's 40-yard dash record. That's nice. When I watched Isaiah Bond play with Alabama and with Texas, Bond is, by the way, the one that caught the touchdown pass to beat Auburn from Milroe a year and a half ago. Okay. But you watch him play, he is so inconsistent catching the ball. Like, he can run I don't really care about him running a record-breaking 40 time. He obviously can go out and run a great 40 time of some number. Good, that's a start. I need to see you catch the ball consistently. And when I watched him at Texas this past year, that was a big problem. His inconsistency catching the ball. And I don't care what the heck you do during some pro day where you're catching and dropping, and going through like the route tree. I've got a bunch of tape that shows me that, like, when you're being covered by somebody who's trying to break you up, you're making it easier for them. That's how I view it.
You only have to get one person to fall in love with that speed, though.
Oh, exactly. But if you are falling in love with combine numbers, I've got an issue with that as to how you're evaluating players. Now, there's certain things I will understand. For example, like, people have always over the years made a little bit of fun of like quarterback hand size and so forth. But there's a reason that they want to take a look at quarterback hand size. Because guess what? It's not your ability to throw the ball if you don't have the biggest hands on the face of the earth, but it's your ability to hang on to the ball. Because if you meet a pro quarterback or even a college quarterback and you shake their hand, it's like having a vice grip. Because you got to be able to, because Ben Roethlisberger was the best at this. He'd have a vice grip on that ball, and you could pound his arm, and he would not drop it. And, so certain things like that, I think, give an idea to an evaluator. But it still, to me, comes down to the tape. What does the video show you? Every single game, all of them, happen to be on TV. You've got video of every game.
Heck, if you're a scout, you probably got video of every one of their practices if you wanted to.
Now, do I want to go out and pay money to sit in the stands and watch some of these guys play? Absolutely. All right? Okay? Because there is a big difference to seeing people in person. Okay? It's not a little bit, it's a big difference seeing people in person. But you've got at least a lot of video evidence of some sort that is sitting there that tells you what somebody can and can't do.
Did you see the Hard Knocks stuff today?
About North Carolina and Belichick?
Yes.
Yeah. That's fine.
They couldn't get an NFL team because they're mad. Apparently they're upset because they feel like Hard Knocks embarrassed Joe Schoen.
Of the Giants?
Yeah, because they showed that Saquon Barkley stuff.
Well, look, first of all, they have a little more approval over what's going on at the NFL level. My goodness. Look, I've talked to Shannon Furman, who's a good friend. And Shannon Furman is deeply involved with Hard Knocks. And we've talked about, what can you do, what can't you do? And there are do's and don'ts for them. Okay? So nobody from the Giants should complain about anything. There's a do and don't list.
Well, I was wondering if it was the clip that was played. I don't know. I think it was after one of the Eagles wins in the playoffs when Saquon went nuts. It was Schoen's teenage son telling him, to keep Saquon and draft Jaden Daniels.
Yeah. That probably didn't help.
No, it sounds like your son is a better evaluator than you are.
Oh, that hurts. Yeah. Yeah. Oh well, it's.
Well, at least people are now on to Nico Harrison and getting rid of Luka, and off of the Giants getting rid of Saquon for their sake.
Yeah. Oh, I know. No, I know. I understand that. So, yeah, but like I said, there's a lot of do's and don'ts when it comes to what Hard Knocks can and can't do. How about that? And again, this is something like a fan wouldn't know any of that because they don't know Shannon. And she's been to a lot of Penn State games.
I wonder what the benefit is for North Carolina. I mean, getting on TV.
Well, who's going to air it? Let me ask you that.
It hasn't. I think Hard Knocks is always on HBO.
So it's on HBO.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people get HBO. So since a lot of people get HBO, maybe that's the benefit of it.
Well, no, I mean, I wonder if it helps his national recruiting base,
that's my point.
Or does he come off? He comes off so standoffish sometimes. Does it hurt them? Just, does his personality? I don't think issues is the right word, but you know what I mean. He's just kind of he's kind of a dour man. Does that hurt him when recruits see that on TV though? Either.
I don't know. I don't know. It's interesting that I've never been around it. When Bill O'Brien was here, if he had stayed for the 2014 season, Bill Belichick was going to be the speaker at the coaches' clinic. But then, of course, O'Brien ended up taking the Texans job. James Franklin came in, so that all changed. Okay. So I've never been around or in the same room with Bill Belichick in my life. My understanding is that if you talk to people around Belichick and you bring up history, the Naval Academy, his dad, something, he will wax poetic and give you the greatest interview on the face of the earth. So it just depends on what topic it is as to how dour he happens to be.
I always remember the reporter asking him about special teams and him doing the 20 minutes on history of special teams and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. And yeah, that's interesting because when it comes to being questioned about strategy or whatever, or about why he kept or didn't keep a player, you're right, he's very closed.
We're on to Kansas City.
Yeah. Now, if he says that this season,
no.
you can then question how are you doing? We're on to Cincinnati. Now, maybe you could play the University of Cincinnati, but if you're on to Kansas City, no. We're on to Clemson. Okay. We're on to Clemson. Yeah, that's...
And I also thought the NFL could make teams do it. So I wonder if they got an indication that this might be a little better show than whatever team they ended up were going to make do it.
Well, Netflix, for example, is doing something on Penn State that's supposed to air later this year. Now, for example, the week of the Purdue game, it was homecoming. Oh, how many years ago? It wasn't that long ago. Just a few years ago. They came in and did a week with Penn State and had James mic'd up on the sideline of the Purdue game. And Liv Schreiber brilliantly narrated it, like he always does. He's really good, by the way. He's got a great voice, and there's certain guys that have great voices for it. What is it? Charles, last name Charles, is the narrator for the NFL Football Life. Football Life. Tremendous. Morrison, who does NBC Dateline, and the stories he does, what a narrator he is on his stories. He's got that storytelling voice. Liv Schreiber's like that.
Josh
Charles narrates a Football Life.
Yes.
Is tremendous narrator, right? Liv Schreiber's like that as well, and he's the one that narrated this extended Penn State piece. Yeah, and James is on the sideline. He said, and a couple of fans had said to me, he says, he's saying some of the same stuff we said in the stands. I said, I know. I tried to tell you that. Like, we see some of the same things you're saying.
I was going to say it's out of his hands mostly at that point too. He can call the play. He can't make him make the play.
Well, for example, football has become very much the coordinators type of game, and I think there's always been the knock on James Franklin that he's the one interrupting the offense and so forth, and that's absolutely not the case. All right? He will tell them, hey, by the way, based on where we are, Andy, you got 2 downs to get. It's going to be 3rd down. You got two downs to get this yardage, and then he'll get on the other one and say, hey, Jim, to Jim Knowles, hey, Jim, I told Andy he's got to think 2 plays here. Just want to make sure you're okay with sending the defense out in case we don't make it at this spot of the field. Okay, you know what I mean? A lot of times that's how it works. It's not him interrupting. No, we're going to run this play, this play, this play, this play. No, he's going. He's listening to what they want to do. Yeah, or there's subtle reminders. Hey, for example, you're running the ball. Suddenly, out of nowhere, hey, let's throw in this pass play. And James may say, okay, hey, great, it's a good time to use it. Or he may say, hey, wait a minute, hold on, Andy. Just remember, all right, don't forget to run the ball. Sometimes you have to give them reminders. Hey, don't forget to run the ball. All right? Because he's seen success. That's an extra set of eyes that any coordinator needs and appreciates. Right? Whereas I'm not telling you what to do. but I'm just reminding you of something. And everybody needs reminding, including you reminding me we have to take a break. So I will take a break to make you feel better. Here on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Lowe's knows that free is just better. That's why MyLowe's Rewards is free to join. As a member, you earn points towards MyLowe's money on eligible purchases, get exclusive free gifts, and earn free shipping at Silver Key status, all on top of weekly member-only deals. Don't wait. Join MyLowe's Rewards for free today and start saving more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
What is a tradition of trust? It's more than just words. It's a promise. A promise that when you walk into Sunbury Motors Ford, you're not just another customer, you're family. It's 110 years of handshakes that mean something, of fair deals, honest service, and putting you first. And right now, that means huge savings on the Ford you want. Pick from 35 new Ford Escapes with savings up to $7,700, starting at $24,915. Or choose from 32 new Ford Bronco Sports, discounted up to $7,000, priced as low as $28,935. Need power? We've got 51 new Ford F-150s, slashed up to $12,616, starting at $45,974. Plus, take up to $10,000 off new Ford Broncos and a massive $13,000 off new Ford Expeditions. Sunbury Motors Ford in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza and at sunburymotors.com. Sunbury Motor Company, a tradition of trust since 1915.
Welcome back. Great to have you with us on the show today. And we're going to talk about the great St. Joe's team of 2004 that the late Billy Packer obviously loved. They shouldn't be a number one seed.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting about that. Number one, I don't get hot and bothered about stuff like that, as you know, because they're just opinions. It's not like he's on the committee and they did what he thought. It was him reacting to what they did. And he's like, that's fine. No
and the
big deal.
bracket has a way to sort that stuff out too, so.
And the other part too is, like, I see Phil Martelli a lot more now because of Jimmy. I'll never bring it up.
Hi, this is Season. For over 100 years, the Purdy Insurance Agency has been protecting families and businesses of the greater Susquehanna Valley and beyond. With the experience of our trained and knowledgeable staff, you can rest assured that your needs will be evaluated and met by some of the industry's best representatives. No matter what your insurance needs are, call Purdy Insurance today at 570-286-5855. Visit our website at purdyinsurance.com or check us out on Facebook to see what we can do for you.
An in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, and Brewers Outlet. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
This half hour being brought to you by the Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket, imports, domestics, microbrews, the best selection of beer anywhere. Wine coolers, water, soft drink, snacks. They roast their peanuts fresh and out every day. 6 great flavors of slushies. And also, now 3 ready-to-drink cocktail mixes. Jack Daniel's, High Noon, Crown Royal, and the Pickle Bar, led by my 2 personal favorites, the Barrels and the Dills, are indeed second to none. All at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. 21 years ago, the St. Joe's basketball team entered the NCAA tournament as a number one seed, captured the imagination not just of Philadelphia but of the nation. Aaron Bracy's written a book about this. Aaron, timing's perfect with the Lapchick Award going to Phil Martelli. Welcome.
Hey, Steve. How are you? Thanks so much for having me on your show today.
It's great to be with you. So for you to chronicle this, give me an idea on the research part of it and the kind of cooperation you got from all the individuals involved.
Well, the research was extensive. I read and dug up every statistic, every article, every press release, anything I could find on that team and that season, because I wanted to be the most prepared I could, not just to tell the story, but for every interview. And each of the research that I found led me to some kind of interesting angles for my interviews. And then the people were extremely cooperative. I interviewed 90 people. I did more than 100 interviews with 90 people, including every coach of the 2003-04 team. Phil Martelli, I sat down with him for 3 hours in his living room and then called him subsequently several times. So got a lot of insight from the coaches and the players. The only players that I was not able to talk to, there was a reserve player named Arvydas Lizius, who no one seems to know where he is. He was from overseas. And Delonte West, who everyone knows who he is. Delonte has had well-chronicled struggles, was in touch with Delonte's family. He knows about the book. I thought we were going to get a chance to talk. The interview just never happened, and ultimately I had to make my deadline. But lots of people talked about Delonte. I talked to his high school coach, obviously all the St. Joe's people, and I got a real mix, Steve, of people to talk to, not just St. Joe's people, but opposing players, opposing coaches, opposing sports writers, fans, support staff. I want to get as many perspectives as I could, Steve, to really understand the story and then hopefully be able to tell it in a way that really is going to be interesting for readers.
It's interesting because Jameer Nelson was, out of Chester, one of the terrific players. What did it take for Phil to convince him to stay home when he may not have been the biggest in stature, but still had a lot of people that thought he could play at a big-time level?
Man, I'm getting chills as you ask that question, because that is actually one of the early chapters in the book where I go into great detail about how St. Joe's was able to land Jameer Nelson. Obviously, I would like people to find that out in detail in the book, but I'll give just a brief overview, Steve. Jameer Nelson was he was undersized. He was a 5'11" point guard, and didn't really shoot the ball that great in high school. At the time, point guards didn't really need to shoot it that well, but he wasn't really being recruited by anyone big. The biggest recruiters for him were St. Joe's, Temple, and UMass. And St. Joe's loved him. First time they saw him, Monte Ross was the assistant coach. He was actually there to scout another player from another team. And the Chester coach, Fred Pickett, at the time said, "Hey, I've got a point guard. He's just a sophomore. I think he's pretty good. Could you take a look at him?" And that was the first time anyone ever recruited Jameer Nelson. Jameer scored maybe 2 points in that game. I don't know exactly how many. He didn't score very many points, if any, but Monte Ross fell in love with the way Jameer played, the way he led the team, the way he played defense. And then Temple and UMass were the other two main suitors, and there were some challenges with each of them, and I'd like to send readers to the book. But suffice to say, St. Joe's did not have it easy to win over Jameer Nelson. Now, I will also say, Steve, that when it came to Jameer's, as he became better in high school, his junior year, he started going to all these camps. And by then, people were like, wow, this Jameer guy can really play. Like, he was not only holding his own with some of the best point guards in the country, but he was out-competing them. By then, some of the high major schools started to give him some looks, but it kind of had been too late in the ballgame. St. Joe's had been with him from the beginning, and in the book, I kind of explained how St. Joe's was able to out-recruit Temple and UMass. But it's really an interesting story, and also I think an inspiring story for people. Like, I think sometimes when someone takes a look at someone and they immediately judge them based on like something like their height or the way they look, whether it's sports or anything else, like you can't always measure someone by something so simple. And Jameer proved he went on to be one of the best players in college. He had a 14-year NBA career, And I'm sure a lot of those high major schools that looked at him for just his height, certainly regretted that over time. But I think it just shows, again, somebody is not always – there's more than just what you see to somebody.
What's interesting is that people may not realize that St. Joe's was in the NCAA tournament the year before. I think they lost in the opening round in a close game to Auburn, if I recall correctly. And
that's correct. They lost in overtime. Really close game.
Yeah, but they opened the season for 304 at Madison Square Garden against Gonzaga. What did that win do to reinforce the confidence of everybody?
That was huge. Gonzaga they were highly ranked. I think they were ranked 12th in the country at the time, and they were a program that had success, obviously at sort of the quote-unquote mid-major level, but certainly were considered a team that was a national program. And those two schools had two great games in the previous two seasons. I read about it a little bit in the book, but I think the two games had been decided by all 4 points, both games coming down to the final possession. So this was the rubber match. They had each won one of them on the other's home court, and it was a highly anticipated matchup, and it really was going to set the barometer for what St. Joe's could be. And they came out, and they played a fabulous game. Jameer was amazing. Delonte West played a great game. Pat Carroll, Tyrone Barley, the defensive wizard as a junior who worked all offseason on his shot. I think he hit 4 3-pointers in that game. And I think that was the start of, like, hey, this could be something special. In fact, in the book, Dick Girardi, the longtime daily news writer who does Penn State radio, I know you guys up there know Dick Girardi, called Phil Martelli the day after the Gonzaga game and said, Phil, I don't know if you're going to lose another game this season.
Yeah. That's DJ. He's my broadcast partner, so yes, I know him extremely well. In fact, we'll be working the Maryland game tomorrow, as a matter of fact. So they go through this, and I don't think people realize that in the history of Division I basketball, there have only been 25 teams that have had an undefeated regular season, and St. Joe's is one of them. And I think after St. Joe's, the next one after that was Wichita State in 2014. So this is a remarkable run for them. But after they lose to Xavier, people wondered whether they'd be a 1 seed. Well, they end up being a 1 seed, and then comes the Billy Packer moment. Now, you and I both know he's just somebody delivering his opinion. He's not in the room voting. But it sure didn't exactly put Phil in a good mood, did it?
It sure didn't. And Steve, you're right. And the last undefeated team before St. Joe's, I think, was UNLV in 1991, 92, I believe, or maybe 1991. But it had been a while. But yeah, they lost that game to Xavier, and they got blown out in that game. I mean, it was just a no contest, which was sort of the most surprising thing. And then you get to Selection Sunday, and there were a lot of detractors saying they shouldn't be a 1 seed. They do get the 1 seed, and then Billy Packer goes. He's on CBS, and he says, St. Joe's shouldn't be a 1 seed. And the thing that really irked Phil Martelli wasn't so much that he was kind of critical of St. Joe's, although that did irk him. But Billy Packer rattled off 9 other schools that he thought was more worthy of a number 1 seed than St. Joe's. And so Phil famously said that Packer could kiss my you-know-what. I know this is a family radio program. And, and it really kind of added to the whole intrigue. St. Joe's had been a huge story that season anyway. Jameer was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. But that Billy Packer moment, just amped it up another notch. And then the irony of all ironies, Steve, was that St. Joe's, they go up to Buffalo, they beat Liberty, they beat Bob Knight and Texas Tech in the first and second round of the NCAA tournament. And who do they get in the Sweet 16? They get Wake Forest, Billy Packer's alma mater. And who is the color analyst for the game? Billy Packer.
Yep. Incredible. Yep. And St. Joe's won the game by, I think, 3 or 4 in that game to advance to the Sweet 16.
Chris Paul was on that Wake Forest team. I talked to Chris Paul for the book. He had some really cool comments in the book. And then they play Oklahoma State. Sorry, I know you're going to ask something else.
Well, no. I was going to say, I want to follow up on that. What did Chris Paul say about facing Jameer Nelson? Because you're talking about Major League college point guard against Major League college point guard.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And this I will give away. He says a little bit more in the book, Steve. One of the really, really interesting things that I found from Chris Paul is not only did he appreciate the opportunity to play against Jameer Nelson and Delonte West, who they knew all about, obviously, Wake Forest, everyone did, and Chris Paul and Jameer would later become competitors and friends in the NBA. But Chris Paul told me that he actually modeled parts of his game from Jameer, from watching Jameer when Chris Paul was a senior in high school, which would have been Jameer's junior year at St. Joseph's. And so I just thought it was really cool and interesting that Chris Paul took some of Jameer Nelson's game and put it into his game. And Chris Paul is one of the 2 or 3 best point guards in NBA history. So it was kind of cool. And Chris Paul talked a little bit more about like what that game meant to him. And people can read about that in the book. But it was really cool to get his perspective. Obviously, one of the greatest players in NBA history, and to have him in the book was a real thrill for the author, anyway.
Obviously, yeah, of course it was. You have Jameer Nelson, Delonte West, guy like Pat Carroll. When you talk to the players, and sometimes you'll get a different perspective from the coaches involved. Which guy on this team was quietly a glue guy and delivered consistently good performances but wasn't a star?
I'm going to give you someone that no one would know. And this guy was a walk-on. So his name is Robert Hartshorn. He was a cheerleader. He was a St. Joseph's cheerleader. And funny story, Phil Martelli saw him dunking at halftime while he was cheerleading. He dunked the ball at the Palestra. And he's like, that guy, this is Robert Hartshorn said, Phil saw me dunk and he wanted me to come out for the team. So anyway, he comes out, he makes the team as a walk-on. He was a practice player. And Robert Hartshorn's role for the team, as people are going to read, is he drove the level of intensity up in practice. And I really call out the part about practice and what St. Joe's was able to do and how it led to their success. But he was a consistent performer in practice, a very unheralded, completely unheralded. No one probably ever knew he was on the team. But he really contributed to their success. Also was positive reinforcement throughout. But it's really like, they were all glue guys, Steve. It's weird because that's part of what made this team great. You know when you think like, hey, who's the glue guy? Like Jameer Nelson was the star of the team, but he was the glue guy. There was one, like after one subpar practice, he took the huddle after the practice and said, he said, we're all trying out for spots here, even me. And like that was the attitude they had. Like no one, he was the leader of that team, but he led by example and words. But if your best player is saying, like, I'm taking every practice, like, I need to make the team, like, every player kind of fell in line. And I felt like they were all glue guys. But Robert Hartshorn is a really interesting story. I think people are going to really enjoy learning more about him and their practices in the book.
There's a certain intensity to playing any game. There's a certain intensity to play at Gonzaga. There's a lot of intensity to play a conference game. But when you're in the Big Five, you have to play everybody else, which brings with it an intensity. What did those Big Five games do to have iron sharpen iron so that when they got to the NCAA tournament, it was like, well, we've done this before?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And, in fact, a lot of the success for St. Joseph's, and people can find in the book, really can be attributed to the Big Five and competing against the likes of Fran Dumpy, who was having a ton of success at Penn at the time. Jay Wright was just starting out at Villanova. And especially John Chaney at Temple. Yeah. Phil Martelli started his coaching career. He lost to John Chaney his first 10 games, and he obsessed with figuring out how to solve the matchup zone and how to beat John Chaney. He crafted much of his recruiting and much of his style of play around how to beat Temple. And he figured if I could beat Temple, I'm going to be good in the Big Five. And Temple at the time was in the Atlantic 10. I'm going to be good in the Atlantic 10. So, hey, that's a good place to start. I need to figure out a way to beat Temple. And I really laid it out in the book, getting not only huge cooperation from Phil Martelli, but Dan Leibovitz, who was an assistant coach under John Chaney, was an amazing resource for the book, explained in detail the matchup zone, explained in detail how St. Joseph's was able to take advantage of it, and Phil Martelli did as well. And I think that's a really interesting read, especially for basketball guys like you and me, Steve. The book itself is a basketball book, but I feel like it's much bigger than basketball, and I tried not to make it too deep into basketball, if that makes any sense. I wanted it to be like anyone could enjoy it. In fact, the copy editor from the publisher said she dreaded the assignment because she hates sports, but read my book and loved it. So that was a great compliment. But in this case, Steve, basketball people are going to love learning about St. Joe's versus Temple and matchup zone. At least I did as a basketball fan.
Yeah, because you talk about Dick Girardi. Later on in life, Dick had to craft, what did he call it, the beer summit, where John and Phil had to sit down after a spat, and Dick kind of brokered it. So again, they needed to break the ice.
Yeah, they did. That was after Goongate. And if I could mention Dick Girardi, since I know people listening know Dick, and I know you know him well. Dick was an amazing resource for the book. Both reading his articles in the Daily News and interviewing for the book, he had so many wonderful things to say. And it's weird. He had like a prescient feel for St. Joe's that season. Like all along, he had his finger right on the pulse of what was going to happen, including their loss to Xavier. And highly encourage people to check out the book and read Dick's comments. And couldn't be more thankful for him contributing to the book in the ways that he did. And also, it was just a thrill to go back and read all his stories. He's such a great writer and in a really kind of unique and colorful way. And I just wanted to shout him out since I know a lot of people know him on this radio station.
I appreciate that. I have to ask about the assistants. How much contact did you have with Matt Brady, Mark Bass, Monte Ross, those guys? Because sometimes assistants can give you some great feel.
No doubt. I talked in depth to all three. They were all amazing resources for the book. Matt Brady was the shooting guru for St. Joe's, and he explained in detail how he transformed Delonte West from a freshman. Delonte West took 15 three-point attempts, Steve, and missed 13 of them. And he transformed into above average, if not great, three-point shooter. Obviously, Pat Carroll was always a good three-point shooter. He didn't need so much help from Matt Brady, but what Pat Carroll did need help was from Mark Bass. Mark Bass, who was an assistant coach at St. Joe's and was their all-time leading three-point shooter until Pat Carroll broke his record, Mark Bass taught Pat Carroll how to get free to get your shot off. And Monte Ross did so many things for St. Joe's and really was the first coach on the staff to recruit Jameer Nelson, develop the relationship with Jameer Nelson, as the whole staff did, but did so much. So the coaches gave so much valuable insight into what made that team great, and really thankful for their time and all the players. The players were they were like an open book, telling me things about the team, and it was just a real pleasure and a real treat for me to learn about the team, and then to be able to tell the story was just a thrill.
And by the way, Pat Carroll's dad, John, played football here at Penn State. So
I didn't know that, but I knew he was a Western PA guy because I know Pat was also looking at Duquesne. Decided on St. Joe's in large part because of Jameer.
So one more time, where can people find this great work?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. The book is called A Soaring Season, the incredible, inspiring story of the 2003-04 St. Joseph's Hawks. It's available everywhere beginning. The publication date is March 1st, which is tomorrow, one day away. Super excited. You should be able to walk into your local bookstore. If they don't have it tomorrow, it'll be there soon. You can also order it now on Amazon, on my website, big5hoops.com. And the publisher is Brookline Books. All three of those places have the book available. So I'd like to say beginning tomorrow, wherever books are sold, which is thrilling.
Yeah, that is thrilling. Thanks so much for your time. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, Aaron.
Thank you, Steve. If I could also just say,
sure.
Zach Hicks is a former student of mine, and I'm really proud of him. And you guys have a great one up there at Penn State, Zach Hicks. So shout out to Zach Hicks. Great player and better person.
Yeah, I think the world of Zach. I really do. He is just one of the nicest kids, and, man, he has a good shot. All right. So
you can shoot it. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Aaron. Aaron Bracy. All right, half hour brought to you by our good friends at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Party time, game time, or just fun time. Doesn't matter what time it is because it's Brewers Outlet time. The beverage supermarket has the area's largest beer selection. Imports, microbrews, ciders, and domestics. Pick from over 100 ice-cold 12-packs and dozens of 24-ounce singles. Soda, snacks, hot sauces, fresh roasted peanuts. Make it one-stop party shopping, and don't forget the pickle bar. So whatever you're celebrating or just doing it up, Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street, Sunbury wants to see you. And thank you for your years of patronage.